Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you've been following this channel for a while and you've seen my last video, you might have been wondering, but is this channel completely changed? Is this guy not gonna tell us anymore about how he's programming his synth and just, talk in general about what he thinks about them? No. Therefore, in this video, I'm going to tell you about what I made up so far about how to program Zebralette3 and, show you a few things, how to make some of the patches I made. I mean, some of the ideas for them. It would take a little long to go, and walk through each one of them, but it's just small ideas so that you can use them in your patch and come up with something of your liking. And for once, let's just not get into it, but let's address something, well, thank you. Thank you to all the people who've been watching my last videos and all the people who've commented and the new subscribers, and I'm happy to be back, and I thank you for this amazingly warm welcome back I've received. Now, so what I'm going to be doing here is just going through a bunch of ideas, trying to find our ground on this synth, finding how we can do more or less familiar things we know how to do on other synths, and then, see if we can find something somehow equivalent or analogous, something to get into that ballpark sound-wise on Zebralette. So, patronizing disclaimer out of the way, let's get our initialized patch and try to make sense of something of this synth. Now, if we were somehow nostalgic of being able to do some simple subtractive synthesis, we can do it. Well, basically, you have an architecture in which we have this, that we generate this shape in one way or another, like by the geometry of it or by the spectrum of it, and then we process through these two effects. And this wave, of course, can be this wave or any other wave along, as in any traditional wavetable synth. Where things get a little less traditional is if I click here and turn this from wavetable to additive, but I don't think I will be talking a lot about this in this video. So let's suppose we want to do something kind of subtractive-like with the sawtooth, which is a very dumb way of using this synth, but has some understanding purposes. Let's say I could use a filter. This is a low-pass filter, which has 100% key follow, and I could just, do something akin like getting my only envelope to control it. I'm already doing my silly pluck. Or a trumpet-like thing, we're already into subtractive synthesis land. We can make it a little more interesting, a little bit more interesting, because you see here we have only one knob, and this thing will, there's no way to make it resonant, to make it interesting. But we can with this one, which does not have 100% key follow, and offers us a bunch of interesting other possibilities. These possibilities stem from the fact that we can change the curve of the filter. Let me get into it. I could use the guides, as I am in this case, or the curve set, which is this. You can, and that's quite a good idea if you need to make complex things, say partition your waveform. I mean, here, if I was doing this theoretically, I'm thinking I'm gonna only be using a sawtooth, or say having that it turns from a sawtooth to a square wave, and just do one sawtooth and a square wave here, and then use all the rest of this space, let's say putting it at 50 for practical reasons, as a curve for something else, in this case the filter, but I could be doing it with other things. So getting to do it, I open the editor, I go here in the guides, and I say I want to edit the guide 1, for example, and let's say I want it to be a little bit steeper. And am I good with it being linear? Maybe, but let's say no, let's make it a little bit different, and then let's get all this and beautify, just to have this nice curve that reminds of somehow of what you would expect to see as a filter response curve, and we can make it steeper or smoother as we wish. So again, I have this, my not really plucky, and now I have this thing happening, and I could make my filter steeper or smoother, one way or the other. So I can get this guide 1 and say copy it to guide 2, which I will do immediately. And once I've done that, I can say change the shape of it a bit, so that, let's say it's like this, I'll make it a little bit steeper, but also I'll put some points here, and then I'll beautify it again, so that there's this sort of a bump, like this bump in the middle of our curve, and we'll make it, no, not this bumpy, just the bump. Like the bump you would expect to see when you are trying to make a resonance, when you're increasing the resonance in a filter. Yes, it won't really work too well, but let's say select all and beautify again, beautify, and you will see that even though it doesn't really sound like that. Now, of course, you could go and try to do somehow, I wouldn't say the exact same thing, by completely ignoring the oscillator effect section, by just going through the oscillator. Because here you can render, you can have the geometry, and I could make something like that, saying, build a sine wave to, find a bunch of waves that have exactly the spectrum I want, so that I build a series of... But I don't have to do that, because I can turn the source from curve geometry to curve spectrum. Now, a disclaimer, you do this and this thing becomes dangerous. I mean, really dangerous. This can smash your tweeters out of your speakers. It can... I would be exaggerating if I said it could blow my head off if I just... But you see, it will give me all frequencies at equal amplitude, which means if I go somehow very high here and I don't filter it somehow, I don't have a limiter, that could do some damage. So, do this at your own risk. But you see, if I'm doing this, and in this case it's kind of tame, I could say go and create another curve here and use this one and make something like that shape I had seen before. I had made in the... Well, I could actually go here and copy it. So that it becomes this, and then I get here, I'll delete this one and make a copy of this. Paste from clipboard, does it? Yes, this one. Exactly this one, and now I say let me move all these. I could move this back or not, just keep it. Now I I mean, I have to move these ones, sorry. Obviously I do. Let's say I move these ones back from here to here, and it becomes something like this. I want it to get more peaking, and I want this dip to be more pronounced. Let's see. More pronounced and even further. Do we like it? Yeah. And you see what I'm getting. I'm getting something. Then you might wonder, can I do PWM? Yeah, of course you can do PWM. It's a wavetable synth. You can do it in a insane number of ways. You can do it from the obvious wavetable, or you can do it from the dual wave here. See, in this case, you can use the guides or a curve set, something else to, you see, in this case, I have the guide one will also be a sawtooth. So in this case, I don't get a pulse width modulation, but I could get one to be to 0 and then edit and remove it and morph and have this thing and changing the depth of it have an effect of moving it in and out. Having a silence here. Say I get this down to here. And back here, I have that when I move the depth of this, if you look at the blue line, this happens. So if this happened to be not this, but a square wave, and I went from depth from this to this, I could have full pulse width modulation, the traditional square wave, but I can do the very same thing with any wave, and adding here anything which is not silence, which actually doesn't get you something very different from PWM, which is what is happening in this patch. And what about FM? Can we do some FM? Of course we can. So in order to do FM, let's start from something which is less of a sawtooth. We can get it in many different ways, obviously. Like I could go and have something that generates only the fundamental, or I could, like I'm doing right now, draw something like a triangle wave and then apply Sinomatic to everything. I could go select all. It would be smarter if I did select all, Sinomatic, and now I have my sine wave. Let's make it to reset, as you usually would do for make traditional FM synthesis, and then I could go for delta X, which basically is a bunch of possible FM ways to do FM, because I can go for this linear, and this would be exactly what you would do with a DX7 or the like, and then I can go, and all this of course allows me to change the ratio of the operators, and here I can choose the order. I mean, whether I'm using the oscillator as a carrier or a modulator. I could put two of these in series, and I would have a somehow primitive and somehow extremely advanced 3-operator FM synthesizer. See, just adding some envelope to this gets you in the usual FM plug territory, and adding more of this. What is, I wouldn't say annoying, but a little bit limiting here is the fact that you cannot change. You can't go for octaves up or octaves up, and that's all you can do. The pitch of these is linked to the pitch of this oscillator, not to the global tuning of the synth, of course. And you have now oscillator effects for that. It precisely is called, unsurprisingly, phase distortion, and it allows you to use a sine wave as a carrier while using this to distort the phase of your carrier. I made a video about how phase distortion works some time ago. It was called The Key to FM Synthesis. Well, actually, few people would argue that phase distortion and FM are today such a different thing. And what if you wanted to do something completely different? Let's say you wanted to do some physical modeling. How could you do that? Well, there is one minor problem here, which is the fact that we don't have a noise generator and we don't have a filter. So how are we gonna do, the things you would expect to be doing in, physical modeling? Like say, how am I gonna do something akin to a car plus strong patch on this? The simple answer is I don't. There is this thing here, the spectral decay, which is really, really interesting. Other YouTubers have been talking about this extensively, Dash Glitch and not only him, and it's very, very interesting because it allows you to, have you transform, this just you can't have anything that sounds anything but plucky with this, but you can make plucky things very interesting because you see you can have, it's like I go here and this guide now is like if I go here and turn on this harmonic grid, you see it's like I could determine the decay of every single harmonic one by one, and that allows me for, interestingly different things with a character. Like, see here, this fundamental will take forever to decay, but let's say I want the fundamental to decay faster. But let's put that this first harmonic is more important, a lot more important. And then let's do some mess with this other harmonics. You can keep messing this up as much as you want until you get the thing you want it to be. Now there's a lot of highs here. I could get it this highs to get a little bit lower. Let's get rid of the fundamental and of the second harmonic. See, this is just getting lost into it. But I'm doing this as it doesn't really go very well, as you might see, with trial and error. But if you take some time with it, it can give you some proper satisfaction. Such as this incredibly complicated and horribly computationally expensive patch, which I will not dare to play polyphonically while I'm also recording this video. What I did here was, I believe, not a good idea. And the reason I'm talking to you about this is because, well, I'm advising you not to do it. What I did was, like creating some sort of a mask for my harmonics out of my curve editor, so that I could go not really harmonic by harmonic, but almost, and then morph from one to another, which seemed like a very good idea at the time, and it actually doesn't sound half bad when it works. Because the problem is that apparently, which, well, I should have understood that myself. I should have been smarter than this. Moving, morphing something which has all these points and handles really does take a toll on your computing power. So if you're making simpler shapes, probably you're making life for your processor a lot easier. So, does Zebralette3 offer us any better ways of getting us, a sparse spectrum to make our hypothetical bells or the like? Well, obviously, it offers us this wonderful, specifically designed effect, which is called sparse. So it just will make, even with depth at 0, it already messes up this sawtooth quite a bit. If I go up here, it still sounds like a sawtooth, but with some strange added brightness. But when I go lower in the keyboard, things change. And if I go and make the effect more prominent, the thing I get starts getting the sparser, as you would expect. And now if I just put the spectral decay thing, even without doing anything about I get something that goes into that ballpark. And if I just did bother doing something to this waveform and not just throwing in there a straightforward sawtooth, well, it could have been more interesting and more deep, which was what I had been doing in the previous patches. A completely different approach to getting a sparse spectrum would be using the additive engine, and through the spectral distortion, by creating a bunch of harmonics in weird positions, we can use this expansion just to, expand the spectrum, which can also be interesting, to, I don't know, emulate the behavior of, I don't know, compressed and boing, something like a spring. I don't know, it makes me sound of that. But something else you can do, especially if you reduce the number of harmonics significantly, is getting something that sounds very hollow. Now, in this case, they're all harmonic, but if I go to something strange, it doesn't sound too harmonic. And if I go here and add even just some spectral decay, I will get to something which has a different sound from the one you had earlier. I could then use some, different harmonic distortions. Let's say go for curve, which allows me to use the guides again, or the curve set. And going on the curve set, I'll do something like... See, now I have a lot of inharmonic content, and I'm just generating it. And this is a kind of horrible, but I can make it, I don't know. For every curve here I can make, I have a different behavior. Until I get something that sounds, let's say, bellish enough to me. So I'm just using my additive engine to generate a bunch of harmonics in weird positions, and then using the spectral decay for this. I could do the same thing and then combine things, because that's the point with this and so many other situations, to do some FM with this as well. So say I'm using this as all this inharmonic strange mess as a source, and then I'm using, as I'm saying, a modulator, and then let's use this one as a carrier. I mean, this one, which will be just a sine wave. Now let's make this envelope a lot quicker, a lot quicker. It's very surreal. I should be tuning it more than a little bit to get a decent bell out of this, but you see that there's definitely bell potential here. By this, of course, I don't mean that you should stay and don't try to do strange things, there's lots to do. In particular, the last patch we were listening to was made with these Twinkles. Twinkles are, well, this is one of the many effects. There are many others you could spend some time trying to make sense of, and I am trying to make sense of many of them myself. Some I do understand better than others. And I'm really having a hard time with this distortion part, because I can't really filter or hue them afterwards, and then I'm really having a hard time using them. But they don't sound bad at all for what they are. What I'm saying here, Twinkles needs a trigger source. Let's say I'll get one triggered by one LFO and the other one triggered by the other LFO. What it does is that when it works even if I put this to complete silence. It will be giving these bleeps on random harmonics of the fundamental I'm playing, and the depth will make them longer. In this case, I have these ones in 16s, which are short and quick, and these ones in whole bars, which are a lot slower. it doesn't really make much sense. But you see, if I go and do something, and you know, these will all make some sense on something else I'm playing. See, because they will all be harmonics. And then, well, I mean, they will make sense harmonically. I wouldn't say melodically, but you see, if as long as this is happening, these things are happening in some time that rhythmically does make some sense. Especially if you get these to be synced, or maybe you don't want to be synced. Maybe you want them to have different changing, because these are polyphonic. Obviously, you see, I'm doing this with LFOs. I could make them a lot more sparse. I could make a lot of these, you know, to add flavor to ambient drones or flowing things, or you know, properly using them as elements in a like the things you were hearing in the previous patch were somehow reminiscent of the Krell patch from the Forbidden Planet. Somehow, actually, more than the things I had made for generative stuff in the previous. Well, because well, this is somehow primitive, I would dare saying, for doing things like that. Just does those blips, but it does them in a very intuitive and simple way. It just tells you, hey, just tell me what source asks you to do a blip, which will be on a random harmonic. Wow. It allows you to, you see, I can do these thing, or like that patch I made earlier, and that's like it's, you're hearing a lot of different sounds, and all you are hearing is one oscillator. It's amazing. So I hope you liked the video, and I'll be probably doing even more about Zebralette and the like, because I'm really having a really good time playing with it and making sense of it. And it's amazing how it has such a vast and immense fart zone, out of which you can find and pick small little flowers that grow there and only there. It is different. It is one of the very few instruments I've played in a while that claim to. It doesn't even try to claim to be different, because those people are, but they don't boast about what their synths do. But this is different. This is something that needs to be programmed differently, and it will reward you for doing that. It is hard somehow. Well, not really hard, but not so easy to get classic, typical synth sounds. You know, making it sound like it would be kind of difficult to make this thing sound like Diva. Suppose you understand, or and getting a believable Minimoog wouldn't be such an easy task just of this, but not impossible. Well, but I mean, yeah, why would I want to do that? That's my point. The point is, this is something that encourages you to go into different, somehow unexplored directions, and it's great. Now, for more thanks in the conclusion, I have to thank George Locke, who left me a comment to a video which made me feel like an idiot, because I made my previous video without having watched it. And in that video, released like a month ago, Eùoè was telling me specifically telling me, a lot of interesting things about how Zebra3 is going to be, and I'm very happy about all the things he's been saying. And he even mentioned specifically the thing of the mod matrix and the instances appearing when you're setting up a modulation, and that's great. That's something I hadn't seen that video. I had my answer already, and so to many other things. Yes, did I say that already? Yeah, I'm really looking forward for it. I'm really waiting for that synth. I can't wait for it. All this said, somehow, again, thank you for your attention, and bye.